Okay, I want to thank Mr. Stromberg for inviting me and giving me a chance to have a part in what I consider a great mitzvah of chesed and also of understanding the perspective that one has to have on special needs children. And I could use every schus I can get, especially as Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is coming up, so I thank him for the opportunity. Rabbis don't have too many friends. My best friend on my moshav is a little girl called Esty, who is a Down syndrome little girl. She's now about 14 years old. She was born on the moshav 14 years ago. And for some reason, since the time she was a toddler, she has become my best friend. She would come when she was a little girl and at simchas or whatever opportunity, come and sit on my lap. She got a little bit older. She was the one who would make sure everybody was quiet when I would speak at a simcha or whatever. And we celebrated her bas mitzvah 2 years ago. At that point, I told her that she no longer could sit on my lap and no longer could have any physical contact, but she comes every Friday night to my house for a bracha and to give me a bracha. And I think I get the better end of the deal, and to get a bag of nash. And she calls my wife Bubby, and we are very, very close with this beautiful little girl. And just recently, another family had a Down syndrome child, a boy, on the moshav, little Ezra, who was also a very, very cute and very special young man. The little boy is 2 years old now, had many medical shilas that came up in his early infancy. And we are very proud of both of those children. And Baruch Hashem, I think the people on the moshav know how to act and how to relate to children like that. And I would hope that the greater public also would be able to understand how to relate, and not only fathers of special needs children and not only Down syndrome children, but children with other handicaps, physical, mental, whatever they may be, are as much part of this world as anyone else, and sometimes need to be treated differently, but with the utmost respect and love and understanding that that's part of the Rebbeinu Shalom's plan for this world, and it's a tremendous opportunity that people have to be able to interrelate with people with special needs. I want to start with a basic rule. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said, there are no generalities in the Torah, there are no rules, and even that's not a rule. Ein klolim, even that's not a klal. There are only specifics in the Torah. So the purpose of tonight's shiur, lecture, whatever you want to call it, is not to give specific personal direction, to answer any specific halachic questions, because each situation is different. Each situation has to take in consideration the person involved, the family involved, the conditions of the family, and many other details, and one would be foolish to give a general hadracha for any specific situation. So the purpose tonight is to give guidelines as to the concepts of chinuch in general, the concepts of why there are special needs children and special needs people in this world altogether, how to relate to them, and chinuch-wise, what is the responsibility of parents and others in the education of these children. Start with very general idea of who we are and what we are. Many people think that we are bodies. You look in the mirror and you see yourself, that's who you are. And you happen to have a little Casper the Friendly Ghost called a soul flitting around inside of you. That is definitely not how it is. We are neshamas. That's how we were created thousands of years ago. On the first or second day of creation, we were created as souls, each and every one of us. And we all were in a spiritual world, somewhere under God's throne, whatever that means. And we could function very nicely in that spiritual world as souls. We could see without eyes and hear without ears and get around without arms and legs. But when we came into this physical world, we needed a spacesuit to wear to be able to function in the physical world. A neshama can't function in a physical world as a neshama. Similar to an astronaut. An astronaut, as long as he's on terra firma, he's on this planet, he can function very nicely without any special apparatus or special suit. He can breathe without an oxygen apparatus. He can get around without a pressurized suit. He can speak without a radio. When he goes into outer space, however, in outer space, so there is no air pressure, and there are no sound waves. There's no atmosphere to carry sound waves, and there's no oxygen. So he needs an apparatus to breathe oxygen, and he needs a pressurized suit, and needs a radio to speak. When he comes back to Earth, he takes off that suit. He doesn't need it anymore. So too, as long as we were neshamas in a spiritual world, we could function very nicely without a physical body. When we came into this physical world, we needed a physical body to function. When we leave this world and go back to the spiritual world, so we leave the body here. Could be for that reason when we manifest and express mourning. When someone dies, we tear our clothing to show that it's only the clothing that's been torn away, but the essence of the person is still there. So we are neshamas. We are neshamas who are clothed with bodies, and those bodies enable the neshama to function in this world. If an astronaut is in outer space and his radio gets damaged, can't talk anymore, you wouldn't think of cutting out his voice box, his larynx, because he can't talk. He's perfectly fine, right? He can speak very nicely, except in the environment he's in, he can't express his speech because there's no sound waves. So he needs a radio, and the radio is broken. Similarly, a person who comes into this world and there's something wrong with his body, so it's like the radio's broken. That doesn't mean his neshama is affected. His neshama is perfectly okay, except his neshama can't express itself and can't communicate in this world because the radio's broken, because the suit of clothing is impaired. And therefore, if a person is a handicapped person, whether mentally handicapped or physically handicapped, that doesn't say anything about his neshama. In fact, just the opposite. The Chazal Ish used to say that a person whose neshama was put into this world in a body that cannot fulfill mitzvahs or is impaired in fulfilling mitzvahs, obviously that neshama is of a greater level because it doesn't need the mitzvahs to perfect it. So the Chazon Ish used to stand up for handicapped people, retarded people, mentally handicapped people, because he felt their neshamas must be of a higher level that don't need that tikkun in this world. In addition, sometimes a person's body interferes and separates between his neshama and the spiritual world. It becomes a mechitza, becomes a partition, a barrier between his spiritual side and the spiritual world. This physical side is a barrier. A person whose physical side is handicapped and impaired, the barrier is less apparent. And therefore, it's very possible that a person like that, his neshama is more sensitive to the spiritual world than a person whose body is normally functioning. So therefore, the first klal is that mentally or physically impaired people, their neshamas may be 100% functionable, except they can't function in this physical world 100% because the spacesuit that they happen to wear, the apparatus that they need to be able to function in this physical world is impaired. That has nothing to do with the impairment of their neshama, or it does not reflect at all on the greatness or opposite of their individual neshamas. Secondly, why did the Ribono Shel Olam create people like that? Why are there people like that? Why is it necessary? So obviously, I can't give you an answer, but I can tell you that this world is made up of many, many components. One of them, human beings. Human beings are the purpose of the world, and there are no two human beings that are the same. People are different. They're different in what mitzvahs apply to them and what mitzvahs don't apply to them. The truth is that we are all, to a certain degree, limited. We all have special needs. No one in this world can function 100% without limitations. We're all limited. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives each and every one of us his limitations, his framework in which to function. And every person is necessary. The world is made up of many, many different parts, like a puzzle. And each part contributes toward the perfection of the world. And it's possible that there are people who are supposed to be in this world for 1 second. And that's their part in this world, and that's how the world reaches perfection. It's very clear like that, because the Gemara says that's what David HaMelech was supposed to be. David HaMelech was supposed to come into this world for a second and then leave. And Adam HaRishon gave him 70 years of his life. But you see that there's a purpose for someone to come into this world for 1 second. There's even a purpose for people who never come into this world, who are stillborn, who are aborted or miscarried. There's a purpose for them also. There's a reason why the Ribono Shel Olam wants those neshamos to come in that way for that amount of time, for nothing more. Why? That's the Ribono Shel Olam's business. I don't understand why there are normal, healthy people in this world. I don't understand why there are handicapped people. Both of them elude me. The full meaning of each person, what they're supposed to accomplish here. It's beyond my comprehension, beyond anybody's comprehension. Reb Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva to a woman who had already 2 Tay-Sachs babies who died around 3-4 years old. And she wanted to know if she could utilize birth control, because the chance of her having another baby like that were very, very great. Reb Moshe gave his tshuva about the birth control, and then at the end of the tshuva he says, but don't think that you had those precious children for nothing. It was a waste. It was a difficult Nisayan, and I empathize with you, Reb Moshe said. But the Gemara says that Mashiach will not come until all the neshamos shebeguf, there's a repository of neshamas called guf, and all of those neshamas have to come into this world before Mashiach can come. And your having 2 neshamas that were brought into this world brought Mashiach a little bit closer. The purpose. Beyond that, why and why you or whatever, that's beyond our comprehension. But that there's a purpose, even for a child that lives a second. Surely a child that lives 3 years, for a child that is handicapped, that is mentally retarded, there's a purpose why every neshama has to come into this world the way that it does, and that brings to the perfection of the world. So there's a purpose. Do we understand the purpose? No. Do we understand why there are so many different people in this world and why there's so many different afilu goyim and all the Chinese and all the Koreans and the people in Africa? No. But that's what the Ribono Shel Olam made the world, the Sheves Yitzhari. He made the world to be populated by all different kinds of people. Each one serves their purpose in this world, and that includes every type of human being and every type of individual with all of the limitations and disabilities that can possibly exist. The next question is, okay, fine, so there have to be people like that in the world. Why do they have to be my children? Why do they have to be in my family? Why do they have to be my brother or my sister? Why do they have to present me with the tremendous nisyonos that having a child like that presents a person with? So here again, we can't know 100%, but we can know that there are definitely possibilities, and maybe all of them are relevant, maybe only some of them are relevant in different situations. People need a tikkun. The Rabban Shalom said this child has to come into this world. Why these parents specifically? Because these parents need some kind of tikkun. A tikkun for something in this world, something that happened before this world, beyond our comprehension, but there's a lot in this world that we don't know, and a lot of things that happened before neshamas came into this world, in previous lives, the gilgulim. Maybe this family specifically needs this tikkun, this nisayon with this child. It's one possibility. Another possibility is that it's an opportunity. The Rabban Shalom knows that this family, these parents, have the ability to be able to deal with a neshama like that, to deal with a person like that, and to bring out their greatest potential. So the Rabban Shalom chose these parents because they're the ones who can interact with this child in the most perfect way. It's also a possibility. So is it an opportunity? Is it a punishment? Is it a tikkun? Maybe all of them. But definitely the Rabban Shalom pairs up the family that can deal with this child properly, both for the sake of the child and for the sake of the family themselves. And the Rabban Shalom knows what he's doing, right? And therefore a family has to be able to find within themselves how they can relate best and try to find out what is it about us that necessitated us to be, or gave us the opportunity to have such a child to be able to deal with. Thinking that, everybody has the nisyonos. Today I had to deal with some families that have children that are going off the derech. Very, very difficult nisyonos. Children who are not handicapped in any way, except religiously. And it hit me, parents who have children who are Down syndrome children, they're never going to go off the derech, right? They're not going to have those nisyonos. So the Rabban Shalom picks different people who can handle different kinds of nisyonos, and you don't want to know, right? Sometimes a family who has a child who's 100% normal, because 100% normal, the nisayon of going off the derech, right, exists, and another family has a child who's 100% not normal, a Down syndrome child, a retarded child, a child that's very, very handicapped. The chances of that child going off the derech are very, very slim. So they have to put up with one kind of nisayon, but they're saved from a different kind of nisayon, and the opposite is the other case. Who knows which is worse? And who knows which family can handle this kind of nisayon, which one? Only the Rabban Shalom. And he's the one who matches the nisyonos to the people who need those nisyonos, who need those opportunities, who can handle those nisyonos, who can handle those opportunities. Another general issue that comes up with people that have special needs children, and that is the following. How do you deal with the following Gemara? The Gemara says in Shabbos, famous Gemara, Yudam Beis, Omer of Chama Bar Guri Omer Rav, La'olam al Yishana Odom Beno Ben Abonim, Shevishvil Mishkel Shnei Sloim Mila Shenosin Yaakov LeYosef Yoser Mishar Bonim Niskanu Bo Echov Nisgalgalo Hadover V'Yordav Avoseinu Mitzrayim. A person should never discriminate amongst the children and give one child more than what he gives the other children. Because Yaakov Avinu gave Yosef a little bit more silk in that famous clothing that he gave, that famous ksonish pasim that he gave Yosef, and because of that the brothers were jealous of him. He got something they didn't get, and because of that, this Galgal Hadover, and they ended up selling him, and they ended up going down to Egypt, and that's how we ended up becoming slaves in Egypt. That was the trigger. How is it possible for a person who has a special needs child? The word itself, special needs, means he has needs that others don't have. And a parent has to spend an extraordinary more amount of time with that child than perhaps with a child who's not special needs, and spend more money on that child. And because of that, maybe there's not money left or time left to spend with the normal children in the family. How does that affect the Shalom Bayis? How does that affect this Gemara? Again, each situation needs personal hadracha and taking into consideration all of the factors. Let me tell you two general rules of where this applies and where it doesn't. Because if you understand this simply and not understand it properly, it's absurd. Does that mean that if I have a daughter who is getting married and I buy her a wedding gown, okay, and I have a 10-year-old boy, I have to buy him a wedding gown too? Because I can't discriminate against my children and give one what I don't give the other. So should I buy my 10-year-old son also a wedding gown? Obviously, that's absurd. So what does it mean? What it means is the following. I shouldn't give one child something that really could be possible for all the children, and there's no reason why that one child needs that more than someone else. All the brothers felt they were fit for that same ksonish pasim. So if Yosef got it and they didn't get it, he was getting something that they also deserved and they didn't get. But the 10-year-old should be told, you don't need a wedding gown. I'm not buying you a wedding gown. Yirtzeh Hashem, one day you'll be a chassan. I'll buy you a suit for your chassan. You'll get what you need exactly the same way that your sister's getting what she needs. Except right now she needs that and you don't need it. When your turn comes, you'll get what you need also. The second rule is, children shouldn't feel that somebody's getting something on their expense. Because they're getting it, I'm not getting something. That also. Achi Yosef felt, Yaakov is giving certain authority to Yosef at their expense. He doesn't deserve it, and they deserve that authority the same way. So he's taking something away from them to give to him. Those two rules have to apply. Therefore, you don't have to give each child the same thing. But children have to understand that maybe this child needs something you don't need. And when you'll need something special also, you may not be a special needs child, but sometimes you have needs that are special. When you have needs that are special, you'll get it too. And in addition, sometimes the practicality is, I can't give my other children the time they need. I can't give them the money, material things they need, because this child needs it more, and if he doesn't have it or she doesn't have it, right, the outcome, the result is going to be much more damaging than if the other child doesn't have it. But I have to let the child know it's not because I favor this child over you. It's because of the metzias, because of the practicality, because of the fact. And therefore, I would love to give you, right, more also. It's just I can't. What difference does it make if the child understands that you would like to give him, but you can't, or you don't give him? He's not getting anyway. It's a very, very big difference. It says that Yaakov Avinu was held responsible that he didn't expose Dinah to Esav's gaze, that maybe he would marry her and maybe Dinah would have a good influence over Esav. So because of that, Yaakov was punished that his daughter was violated by Shechem. He didn't want to marry her to a Jew. She's going to be violated by a Goy. So the obvious question is, that's the way people pick Shidduchim? That's what Yaakov Avinu should have done? Should have married his daughter to Esav with the hope that maybe she'll be mashpi on Esav. And what if Uncle Esav is mashpi on Dinah? How could he take such a risk? That's what he's supposed to do. Says the Alter from Slabotka, no. Yaakov Avinu should not have taken a chance of letting Esav even see Dinah for fear that maybe he'll want to marry her and maybe he'll influence her. And therefore Yaakov did the proper thing. He hid her away in a box. So what was the problem? The problem is that when he knocked the nails in the box, he did it with a little bit too much enthusiasm. He should have been crying and saying, I wish I could take a chance with my daughter that maybe she could influence Esav, but I'm not allowed to do that. I can't put my daughter in such jeopardy. So I have to hide her away. But it hurts me that I can't influence my brother Esav. When he put her away, it wasn't so much because he was concerned about Dinah. It's because the Rebbeinu Shalom felt a little bit he's not concerned about Esav. And that's why he was punished. Person sometimes has to do something. But sometimes you have to have the feeling that I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I could do differently. This is what I have, practically speaking, this is what I have to do. I have to take that extra money and spend it on my special needs child. I have to take that extra time because if I don't, the implications, the repercussions for that child will be disastrous. And it won't be so disastrous if I don't spend that money on my child who doesn't have special needs, or I don't give him that time. But I feel bad. I wish I could give. I wish I had double time to give. I wish I had double money to give. What's the difference? The difference is that when you'll be able to do the other, you'll do it. But if you don't even feel bad, then you'll lose sight bichlal of how much you have to do also for your regular children also. So the child also should feel like that. That my father, my mother, right, have to spend that extra time with that special brother or sister. They have to spend that extra money. But they would love to do it for me, and then you can show that child when it's possible, even when it's not all that important, that when it's possible, you do spend that extra time with him, and you do give him that extra money, then he understands that the other one's not getting on his cheshbon. The other one's not getting something that he should be getting. The other one's getting it only because it's like the sister who needs the wedding gown. She's the one who needs the wedding gown now. You don't need a wedding gown. You're a 10-year-old boy. If the child gets that feeling, then this kind of rift in the family doesn't come about. And also a parent can involve the other children in the family to feel that it's an opportunity for them also, that they have an opportunity to be able to deal with this special brother or special sister. And it's not a detriment to them, just the opposite. It's an opportunity. Again, children are educated by how parents feel and how they are directed to feel. And if you educate your children properly, especially from a young age, to appreciate the fact that they were given a special opportunity. There's a girl on our Moshav who just put out a book by Menucha Press, My Special Brother. This is the sister of this little boy who was born with Down syndrome about 2-3 years ago on the Moshav. She's a very, very talented teenager, young girl, and she's already put out 2 books under a pen name, not under her own name. And in there she shows this idea of how, as a sister, she feels what an opportunity it is, what a privilege it is to be able to deal with a child like that. Now, you can feel that way, or you can feel what a drag it is to have a brother like that, and how much my parents have to spend time with him and not with me. It depends on your attitude. And a child can be directed to have a positive attitude if that's the direction that's given in the family. That's also very important. There's an interesting marsha. The Gemara says, Hamoneya Torah mitalmid, a person who refuses to give over Torah to a student, even the embryos curse him. So the marsha explains, it's talking about a teacher or a parent that has a child that is not very bright, a handicapped child mentally. Okay? And the person says, there's no purpose in teaching this child. What can he understand? Right? It's a waste of my time to teach a child like this. So that kind of person, the embryos curse him. Why? Because it says Malachim teach embryos. Somebody who thinks that teaching Torah is only something that you can do in regards to the gray matter of a person's brain and how much he's going to absorb in his physical, mental capabilities, denies the fact that you can teach an embryo. What can you possibly teach an embryo? But the Torah is not like that. Torah is something that is transmitted to the neshama of a person. Yes, it goes through the gray matter of the brain, but that's not where it stops. And adarab, if a child wouldn't learn Torah when he's an embryo from a malach, he wouldn't be able to incorporate and integrate Torah from the gray matter of his brain, because Torah is not just a subject. It's not just physical, material knowledge. It's spiritual knowledge. And therefore, it has to impact on the spiritual side of a person. So if that spiritual knowledge wasn't implanted in a person by a malach, he wouldn't be able to learn Torah afterwards. He's just regaining and accessing the Torah that he got from that malach before he was born. So therefore, teaching a child who on the surface seems like he can't learn because he is disabled mentally in some way, but that means that you're relegating the Torah to just another kind of wisdom, and it's not. It's a spiritual thing. And teaching a child, even a child who may show that mentally doesn't grasp, but you don't know what's going into his neshama. And that body is only a temporary clothing, right? The radio's broken, but you don't know how much you're affecting that person even though his radio's broken. What's going into his neshama. So a person who denies the fact that Torah can be transmitted neshama-wise is going to be cursed by the embryos, because you're implying that they can't learn Torah then. In addition, when we speak about education, educating a child for Torah and mitzvahs, there are two aspects to mitzvahs. There's what's called the melech mitzavel ha'am, the king commanding his subjects. God is the king, and the king wants obedience for the sake of it's good to be an obedient person, a civilized and disciplined person. The Rebbe Shalom wants people to be disciplined, to be able to make good moral choices, so he gave us things to do. And if we are disciplined and accept authority, he'll reward us as the king. And if we go against his authority and we rebel, he'll punish us as the king. Then the reward and punishment is extrinsic to the mitzvah. The mitzvah itself may have no benefit at all. It's just that God wants you to fulfill that command, and if you fulfill the command, you'll get rewarded for being an obedient servant. Okay, imagine a king who commands the people in his realm, nobody's allowed to eat watermelon. He wants to show his authority, right? And he's doing it for the sake of the people. They should be people who can accept authority. Nobody's allowed to eat watermelon. You eat watermelon, you get your head cut off. Somebody eats watermelon, the watermelon's not going to harm him. But if the king catches him, he's going to cut his head off. So the punishment comes from outside the action itself. There's another aspect of Torah and mitzvahs, and that is Rofei Miyayitz Sachola. The doctor advises patients. Somebody comes to a doctor, he's examined. The doctor says, I see that you are allergic to watermelon. Deathly allergic. If you eat watermelon, within 20 minutes you'll be dead. So I very strongly advise you not to eat watermelon. Here, if the person eats watermelon, the doctor's not going to punish him. The watermelon's going to punish him. It's the watermelon itself that is detrimental to the person. The Rabban Shalom created the world, and he told us, look, these things are vitamins for your neshama and your body. And these things are deathly. They're poison. If you don't listen to the Rabban Shalom, the thing itself is going to punish you. He's not going to punish you. But doing the Aveira itself is the punishment. Doing the mitzvahs is itself the reward. The Telzer Rosh Hashiva says that most mitzvahs and aveiras have both aspects to them, the king and the doctor. There are certain exceptions. Okay, for our purposes now, that's enough to understand. And therefore, certain children are not capable of receiving the command of the king. They're not capable of understanding commands, of being disciplined like that, because they're basically, handicapped. Handicapped either physically, they can't fulfill that command, or mentally, and they can't understand or deal or function, right, with great discipline. They're not capable of that. So they're not going to get rewarded or punished, or teaching them is not going to affect this. They may be exempt from those mitzvahs because the command doesn't apply to them. But on the other hand, doing those mitzvahs and not doing those aveiras may still benefit their neshama because of the intrinsic value of the mitzvah and the intrinsic detriment of the aveira. So there's two ideas in chinuch. One, to train a child to be able to obey commands and fulfill commands. And the other one is to see to it that the child does things that are good for its neshama, even if it can't function with the command. So it's possible that a child who is exempt from Torah and mitzvahs on a certain level, but on another level, there's still an idea to protect that child from doing aveiras and to encourage that child to do mitzvahs, even if they're not going to be rewarded or punished because they're not capable of following a command. But the benefit of the mitzvah and the detriment of the aveira is still there. With that in mind, we will explain what the guidelines of chinuch are for a regular person, and see then how it applies to handicapped people. There is a mitzvah to educate children, to teach them how to fulfill positive commandments, and to educate them not to transgress negative commandments. When it comes to positive commandments, the mitzvah applies for different mitzvahs and for different children at different times. The basic rule is the child has to be capable physically to fulfill that mitzvah, right? He has to have the motor dexterity or whatever to do a mitzvah. Let's take an example, lulav. Okay, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of lulav, you have to be able to hold a lulav and esrog in your hands, right? Obviously, an infant's not going to be able to do that. You also have to know how to shake that esrog and lulav properly to all four directions, not take it and use it as a broom or poke people's eyes out with it, okay? So you have to know how to hold it properly, how to shake it properly, and that is the mitzvah of lulav. When are you required to educate a child, buy your child a lulav and esrog, and educate him how to do it? When he's capable of doing it. When he's capable of holding an esrog and lulav without blinding himself and other people around him, and being able to hold it and shake it properly. If he can do that, he doesn't have to understand all the deep mysteries of what esrog and lulav represent. He just has to be able to do the action. When he's able to do the action, then you train him. Tzitzis, maybe a little bit easier. Right? Tzitzis, you just have to know how to wear a garment, keep 2 tzitzis in the front and 2 in the back, right? And when you're capable of doing that, you have the mitzvah tzitzis. That may be a younger age. Usually the age where a child is capable physically and mentally of fulfilling mitzvahs that have to do predominantly with action is about 5-6 years old. That is the age of chinuch for mitzvahs aseh that are dependent on action. Then there are other mitzvahs that aren't dependent just on an action, but they're dependent on an action that represents a concept, an idea, kiddush. Right? Just taking a cup of wine in your hand and saying a bunch of words is not kiddush. Kiddush means you sanctify the Shabbos. So a person who can hold a goblet in his hand, right, and mumble a few words isn't yet capable of making kiddush because he doesn't know what he's doing. There, a child has to be a little bit older to understand the concept of there's a holy day in the week and we are saying kiddush to make that day special. He doesn't have to understand the depth of what Kiddush represents. Just that simple idea. This is a special day. We are making a special bracha on a special cup of wine to show that that day is special. Same thing with Havdalah. Same thing with Arba Kosos. It's not just drinking, a cup of wine or grape juice. That's the mitzvah. The mitzvah is drinking it because you're free. So you have to understand the concept of freedom, at least that much. So that, a child has to be a little bit older.